I'm Joel Cruz, editor of Meat and Poultry, bringing you this expert viewpoint, sponsored by Elanco Health. As poultry producers know, much of what happens on the farm and in chicken houses manifests at the processing plant, including threats to food safety. Recent research from Elanco's senior consultant for monogastrics, Dr. Alissa Welsher, will shed light on one of these threats. We thank Dr. Welsher for joining us to discuss how darkling beetles in poultry production can be controlled to prevent food safety problems at processing plants. So Dr. Welsher, let's jump right into it. Because darkling beetles are part of everyday broiler production, what are some of the threats and maybe telltale signs that start at the farm and can become bigger problems at the plant level?
Thank you, Joel. So darkling beetles have always been an issue in poultry production, mainly through their detriment to kind of the housing structure, right? So they'll chew through insulation and sill sealer and all kinds of things that decrease the efficiency of that house. But more in recent years, we've looked at, can they carry certain poultry diseases? We've found that they do, in fact, carry a lot of kind of the big ones. So avian influenza, E. coli, fowl pox, and salmonella. And so that's kind of that salmonella piece is where it leads into the processing plant. These guys can become this reservoir that continues on through multiple flocks that go through this house if they're not managed. And because of that, it's just one more thing that really adds to that pre-harvest salmonella load that then goes into the plant for processing.
I know vaccinations and litter treatments, some of those things are common practices to control the salmonella load of birds coming into the plant. If you would, can you talk a little bit about the additional steps needed to help control darkling beetles and their resilience and ultimately how they affect pre-harvest salmonella levels?
Yeah, so the salmonella vaccines and litter amendments that are out there right now are a really big step in helping to decrease that pre-harvest load. So again, more tools in the tool belt that there can be. So when darkling beetles, when we started looking at them as a potential, factor in this load that comes into the plant, we said, there's salmonella vaccines, there are litter amendments, and these all help to lower that number. If we lowered the beetle number, would that help, again, would that kind of be an additional factor that then helps lower that salmonella load coming into the plant? And so, looking at, how you evaluate these beetles in the actual house and, what score kind of you assign to a house. So, do they look like they have a really bad beetle load? And does that then, maybe translate into, a higher load that kind of comes into the plant? And if we fix it, could that help, in addition to salmonella vaccines and litter amendments, could that help lower that overall house salmonella load?
Well, you kind of touched on this already, but can you tell us a little bit about Elanco's recent research that you helped lead in terms of what the goals were, maybe the methodology, some of the key details and findings?
Yes. So, as I had mentioned, we started looking at, could you tell the amount of salmonella coming in, or potentially would your salmonella load change if you had a higher beetle score on farm? And so what we started doing was working with several integrators. And now this was across, the United States. So different geographical regions, different bird sizes. So large, small bird. And then we also looked at, different litter, right? So if they were on rice hulls, if they were on pine shavings, if they were on peanut hulls. So kind of taking beetles from all of these different areas, as well as doing environmental feathers rinses on some of the birds, to then look at, what was the salmonella load in that house? So looking at what was on the bird coming into the plant, and then looking at beetles and that score. So if it was a really high score in the house and they hadn't really managed that population, what did that look like? Did it correlate to, a higher salmonella load because you had a higher beetle load? And as we kind of progressed through this, we did start to see that it seems it's almost a complex variation. So if the complex is very good at, insecticide management and salmonella management, and they have a lot of these interventions in place, they seem to have, a good correlation, say a low beetle score, a low salmonella. We did see the same happen where there was maybe higher beetle load and higher salmonella. So we would see that correlate. And if there was ever a time where it did not correlate, we started to look into, when did they start an insecticide program, and when did they maybe start salmonella mitigation with, pre-harvest impact. And so we started to see that where it didn't correlate, they had just started an insecticide program. And so maybe their salmonella load would be high and their insect load would be low because they started a new insecticide, which was taking care of the population. But in essence, the damage had been done, if we want to say it like that. That salmonella had already been, on the birds, within the house, environmentally wise, and it now is headed to the plant. And so our goal of this really was to say darkling beetles are not a silver bullet to salmonella, but they are a piece of that puzzle. And so if you can have another tool in your belt that says, we take away, we do a vaccination, we do a litter amendment, and now we take away another potential reservoir for salmonella in that house, we are just, in essence, with all of these things, now lowering that pre-harvest load that comes into the plant so that the plant interventions aren't basically overpressured.
So when you and your team go out and visit with a producer on site or otherwise, what are some of the main points that you and your team focus on to help them keep beetle populations at a manageable level?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we do at Elanco, we have a team for insecticides. So myself as technical, and then we have 2 sales representatives. And what we do is we have an evaluation sheet that basically we go through 6 different observation areas within a house. And we, move aside the litter, and we basically, as quickly as you can kind of look at these guys as they move very fast. Try to get a good number of, what did we think we saw? Did we see 10 to 20? Did we see over 100 within this one area? And then we'd assign a score to that observation area. And then at the end, we kind of tally up that total score, and then we give a score to that house. And so we will let the grower know, we'll let the integrator know, and just say, this, if it's a high load, it's something that needs to be managed. So that population is what we would consider kind of out of control. And we would need to then manage it with usually insecticides, and then obviously on-farm management as well. And what we do with the insecticide piece is, we will send some of those beetles out to a third-party lab, and they will test them for sensitivity. And what that basically means is they're going to test them against the 4 chemical classes of insecticide we have for the poultry industry. And we would then test them against each other on these beetles and see which one of these chemicals is the most effective at reducing that number in that house. And so then we would come back to the integrator and say, you may have been on the wrong chemical class. This one's actually the one that this population is most sensitive to, and then can be a more manageable population.
So if producers or processors wanted to find out more, what are some of the resources available from Elanco or other sources that might help them fill in the blanks if they think they might have a problem or want to prevent a problem from occurring?
Sure. So we do have resources on our website at Elanco US, so elancoanimalhealth.com. And if you also go to IRAC's website, so it's Insecticide Resistance Action Committee, IRAC, that will tell you all of the different chemical classes that are out there. You can look at it by poultry as well by species, and it will tell you basically how to rotate and kind of where to look on the label for those different modes of action.
Okay, excellent. Well, I want to thank Dr. Welsher for her expert viewpoint on this very important issue.